The NFL just screwed the Minnesota Vikings as the schedule release is here and it is ruthless. But the true measure of greatness is dealing with adversity, and this team is more than up to the challenge, not stressing about anything. We're going to be breaking out all that in this episode of Vikings Digest. But first, if you're enjoying this Vikings content, you want to stay up to date and help us reach our goal of 1,500 subscribers before the start of OTAs, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you can stay up to date on all things Vikings. And with that, let's hop straight into it with mark your calendars, folks, because the schedule release is here and we finally know when and where we are going to be playing our teams this year against these opponents, I should say, sorry. And it was brought to us by one of the coolest schedule release videos in recent memories on the Vikings social media page. If you guys haven't noticed, I might have a few tattoos. So seeing this video being brought to us by fans that got tattooed at the Vikings draft event, and they're having a pop-up event in Minnesota tomorrow. So if you guys are in the Twin Cities and you want to go get tattooed by a really cool Vikings tattoo, go and check it out. It'll be a fun event. Sadly, I am in Windsor, Ontario in Canada, so I won't be able to make it there, but I really wish I would be able to, or that I was in that video these fans were, because that is a really cool opportunity. But back to the matter at hand, and that is the schedule. So you see there where these great logos are brought to us with some awesome takes on these opponents that we're going to be facing. We start off the season against the Chicago Bears on the road, and then the Atlanta Falcons. Back-to-back primetime games, which hasn't happened since 1981. What a hell of a way for JJ McCarthy to come out swinging with his first regular season start against a division rival like the Chicago Bears, on the road, mind you. And then we have Cincinnati. Then we're on the road to Dublin, Ireland in the Rocky Roads to face the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then the following week in London, England to face against the Cleveland Browns, followed by a bye week. Then we host Philly at home. Then we go to LA to face the Chargers, to Detroit to face the Lions, back at home against the Ravens, and then back at home once again against the Bears, on the road to Lambeau, on the road to Seattle, home against the Commanders, then on the road to Dallas and the Big Apple, followed by 2 home games closing it out against the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. So this is going to be a very big schedule for the Vikings, and it ranks tied for 5th as far as difficulty of schedule, along with the Packers and the Cowboys. So it's going to be a very difficult season for the Vikings. However, pressure either creates diamonds or bursts pipes, and that's what this season is going to be all about, because whether Vikings fans want to admit it or not, it seems like there's this belief that the NFL has it out for us almost every single year as far as the schedule making. That is usually the case. However, this past season, we benefited from an easy schedule. The entire NFC North did, and that's why the NFC North went completely winless in the playoffs. They didn't have the parts to compete in the playoffs because they were frauds the entire season and got exposed. I'm saying that about the Bears. I'm saying that about the Lions. I'm saying that about the Packers. And unfortunately, I'm saying it about the Vikings because we just did not have the right wins to match with some of these playoff teams. When we look at the opponents we played last year, we played the NFC South, the AFC South, and a few other good teams here and there. But overall, 2 weakest divisions in football that we went up against. We swept through them, but at what cost? We didn't win any of the big games that mattered. We played against the Rams. We lost that one. We played the Lions twice, lost those ones. Then we lost in the playoffs to the Rams. So now it is time to nut up or shut up for the Minnesota Vikings. And it is time to see what we are made of. Overall, I think this is going to be a very tough schedule for the most part. It's not going to be easy, especially when looking at the divisions that we're playing against the NFC East with a lot of playoff potential teams, and against the AFC North, which does also have some playoff potential teams in there. Not so much the Browns or the Steelers. However, we're playing them on neutral ground territory, which should feel like a home game, even though it's technically a road game. That was something that I did mess up on in our last video, where I thought that those were home games we were losing, but those were planned road games. So those could be treated as a version of a home game, because we know from past experiences that Minnesota Vikings fans in the UK, you guys show up and you show out. So it'll be interesting to see those ones, especially when preying upon a team that doesn't exactly have two teams exactly that don't have it figured out at quarterback, and we could be able to feast on early on in the season. But looking at also these opponents, where I think the schedule makers gave us a little bit of grace while also slapping us in the face, is that a lot of the hard teams that we play this year, the Bengals, the Steelers could be one of those sneaky ones. The Falcons as well with Michael Penix, they're starting to turn around. But mainly Falcons, Bengals, Eagles, Chargers. and the Lions as well, because that's going to be a tough one, and then the Ravens. So all the way through the first 10 weeks of the season, those are going to be really tough games. However, I'm happy that we're playing those games earlier in the season rather than later on, because a team like the Eagles, they are going to be firing right out the gate. The Chargers, they might take a little bit of time to kind of figure it out. We know they're a little bit inconsistent, basically like the AFC counterpart of the Vikings. The Bengals, they are notorious for starting off crap and then finishing it off strong at the end of the regular season, whether it's too little, too late, or if they're still in the playoff race. So the Vikings, we have a chance to feast on that. I know that wasn't the case a few years ago when we played them week 1 and we lost a terribly heartbreaking last second field goal in that game. I'm still pissed off about the results of that game just all these years later. It's been about 3 or 4 years now, and I'm still thinking about it, obviously. But this is a team where we could feast on them early. Justin Jefferson versus Jamar Chase, that could be obviously a Showtime matchup, but we want to see the Vikings just absolutely go in and dominate. And where the NFL started to slap us in the face is when you look in that back half of the season, where we have the Packers and Seahawks on the road, Commanders at home, but then Giants and Cowboys on the road, closing it out against the Packers and Lions. But when you look through there at weeks 12 through 16, only one home game through a really tough stretch late in the year, going into hostile environments, especially Green Bay and Seattle, where it is very tough to win, especially with the weather at play. Cowboys and Giants, it's a bit of a better one, but the Giants, don't count them completely out. I don't think they'll be a playoff team. However, I still think the Giants are a team that can be a force to be reckoned with. But again, they're up there with strength of schedule, so they're going to be a really tough one to get a lot of wins. However, with the Vikings, it's not going to be as difficult for us to come by wins just because we're overall a better team. Then closing it out with the Lions and the Packers, with the potential for that Packers game to be flexed, and that Lions game on Christmas Day. I can't wait to see the Vikings whiteout. That's one of the games that I've looked forward to every year since they started it with that Indianapolis game. That was one of the best games after starting off as one of the worst games in Viking history. But that was the first whiteout game, and we absolutely were able to just bring the energy with that. Can't wait to see how these kind of whiteout games evolve and what energy that we bring into a late season game against the Lions in US Bank Stadium. For the past few seasons, when you look at the Vikings playing against the Lions, it's usually been on the road late in the season, and that leads to a lot of momentum on the Lions side. However, when we play them earlier on in the year at home, it's kind of a bit of a mixed bag. So if we're able to go on the road and get an early season win against them while they're still maybe trying to figure things out without Ben Johnson there, and then by the time that they come into US Bank Stadium, we are able to just run them out of the building. That is something that I think Minnesota can be excited for, and I think is a bit of a change of pace from the past couple of seasons from what we've seen, where we go into Lambeau Field late in the season, or we get them at home, or for the most part, we're going into Ford Field late in the year in a big game where the Lions just have late season momentum, whether it's they have nothing to play for except for pride, or they're playing for a number 1 playoff seed. With the implications of those games, usually that's going to be nice to be played on US Bank Stadium for the first time in what seems like 5 years almost. Can't remember the last time that the Vikings had a late season game against the Lions in Minnesota with this many implications. Maybe 2 years ago there was one, but I think before that it's been quite some time since the Vikings have hosted the Lions in a late season game in Minnesota. So this is hoping that that's a trend towards things changing. But overall, what do you guys think about this schedule? What did you guys think about the schedule release video? It was a really cool video to watch. I was really excited to see what the Vikings social media team was going to do with that, and they did not disappoint. It's really cool to see how these different teams kind of show out their different talents with their schedule release videos and just get really creative with it. Minnesota has always done a really good job. The Chargers are another team that's really good at them. So it's really cool to see that they went all out with this one. And yeah, I might be a little bit biased because of the ink on that I have, but it was really cool to see a tattoo parlor meet the Minnesota Vikings, and so many cool tattoo ideas that you guys can get if you are in the Twin Cities and are around the Flash event that is happening tomorrow in Minnesota. But overall, I feel all right about this schedule. I definitely think the NFL did ultimately screw the Minnesota Vikings with how they planned out those road games, and especially where they're happening late in the season. Most of our home games are early on in the season, and honestly, when you're a team with playoff aspirations or Super Bowl aspirations like the Vikings, you want to have as many home games as you can later on in the season. But thankfully, we close out the season with 2 home games against 2 divisional rivals, so that could be a very big swing in our favor. But overall, let us know what you guys think about the schedule release, about the Vikings schedule release. What do you guys think our record will be overall? If you're just looking at a first glance of the schedule, I could see the Vikings going with a generous 12-5 record. Now, I know that's not as high as the amount of wins that we had last season, but the main thing to keep in mind here is it doesn't always matter what your record is. It matters who you play. When you look at the Rams last season, they were a team that was 11-6, and they played us like a 14-3 team by the time that we played them. So it goes to show that the Vikings, we definitely benefited from an easier schedule last season and got exposed when it mattered. Then you look at a team like the Rams, they were a team that played a lot of tough teams, dealt with a lot of adversity, but found a way to make it happen and got into the playoffs with an 11-6 record and was basically one possession away from going to the NFC Championship game. So that's the thing, is if you go 11-6, 12-5, doesn't entirely mean you're a bad playoff team. It just means that you could be a very scary playoff team because you have that edge on your shoulder. But let us know what you guys have to say about all of this down below, and let us know how pumped you guys are for the Vikings season along with your win total projections. But that's going to do it for this episode of Vikings Digest. I've been your host, Griffen. Take care.